event. So Kentucky American Water, thank you. And we're going to hear from their president in just a few minutes. Also want to thank you for joining us today to be with our special guest, Attorney General Daniel Cameron, the Republican candidate for governor. So we're looking forward to hearing from him. And also let me take a moment to recognize some of our special guests in attendance. Please stand to be recognized, but let's hold our applause until the end. We have with us from the State Representative Matt Lockett. Matt. State Senator Donald Douglas. There he is. City Council members. Let's recognize the following council members. Chuck Ellinger. Tanya Fogel. Brenda Menares. Shayla Lynch. And Dave Savigny. Field office representatives that we want to recognize. Stephanie Nelson, field representative for Senator Mitch McConnell. There you are. Tatum Dale, district director, Congressman Barr's office. Carol Rogers and Mackenzie Todd Post. Yeah, I told you I was going to be introducing you today. Yeah, she's smiling. Good. Congressman Barr's staff. And Hunt Vandertool, legislative director, Congressman Barr's DC office. We spent a lot of time with the local folks, but with this guy, he's incredible. We appreciate you all. And I would like to kind of throw in an audible that I don't do, and I always feel bad when I leave. I'd like for Commerce Lexington staff and board members to stand and say, we can say a big thank you to everybody. And they're shy. I know. They're going to tell me when it's all over, why did I do that? There we go. I know you would all say this and ask me why it took me so long, but I'm one of the most blessed people anywhere to work with people in this room, the leadership. We're that big town, small town where we all come together and we do all the right stuff for the right reasons. And we're especially grateful for you being here today. Also, let me take this opportunity to thank our event sponsors. The sponsors are listed in the program at your seat, at your table. Take a look at the back and all those folks. When you run across them, when you see them, say thank you. We appreciate the fact they allow us to do things that we could not do and to do them extremely well. We have connections and we touch at the local, regional, state, federal levels. Don't ask us how we do it, we just do it. But how we do it is we got incredible staff, but we also have you that are out there a lot, and we all have this synergetic interaction together with them, and it really makes for a very powerful group. So thank you to all the sponsors. Now I'd like to invite Catherine Nash, President, Kentucky American Water, to the podium to make some presenting sponsor remarks. Catherine.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the entire team at Kentucky American Water, we also want to welcome you to today's luncheon. It's a privilege to be here, and we also want to recognize the special guest today, Attorney General Cameron, so thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be able to continue to sponsor this series, and we also want to just take a minute to say thank you to the staff at Commerce Lexington for putting this together. It takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, so thank you to everyone there. Just a quick safety reminder with the heat outside. We have a focus this week with our crew, since most of our team works outside, to hydrate. So just wanted to bring that up about drinking water throughout the day, and especially if you're going to be outside working or playing, that really it's recommended to start drinking water the night before. So just wanted to pitch that, and then also just say, representing the water company, the tap water here is an excellent source of water. It's clean, it's reliable, it's safe. So in a pinch, bottled water is great, but just wanted to throw that out. So thank you again for being here, and Mr. Cameron, we look forward to your comments.
Catherine, thank you. Kentucky American Water staff, thank you all for being here, and supporters. We have had a great relationship over the many years, and we value that greatly. And Catherine, that could not have been better advice. Some people like myself, we think we're still this real young individual, and quite frankly, when you have heat indexes over 100, we think we can beat it, we can do anything, but many times we can't. So be very careful, and also those around you, neighbors, as you said, make sure that we don't try to do foolish things as we get maybe sometimes too old. Okay, just me. It's now my honor to introduce Kentucky's Attorney General. Daniel Cameron is the 51st Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. He's the first Black American independently elected to statewide office in Kentucky's history, and the first Republican elected to the Attorney General's office since 1948. Wow. As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the Commonwealth, he is committed to defending state laws and protecting Kentuckians from criminal activity. Some of the top issues we face include fighting the drug epidemic, protecting victims of child abuse, and human trafficking. General Cameron served as legal counsel to Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, participating in the successful confirmation of conservative federal judges, including Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Cameron grew up in Elizabethtown, graduating from John Hardin High School. Mr. General, my son played the football game there. We got beat. I think we're getting over it, finally. Okay, we got thumped. It was not a good night, but great school. He attended the University of Louisville, where he played football and graduated from the Brandeis School of Law. After graduation, he completed a federal judicial clerkship. Prior to his election as Attorney General, Cameron practiced law in Frost Brown Todd's Louisville office. He lives in Louisville with his wife and son. As I mentioned earlier, General Cameron is also the Republican gubernatorial candidate for governor, which is why we're here to listen to him and talk with us, and we'll have some Q&A afterwards. Will you all help in welcoming to the podium candidate for governor, Daniel Cameron.
Well, thank you, Bob, for that very kind welcome and the opportunity to speak today. It's certainly amazing to be in front of a group of friends. I know as I've talked to people in this room, I saw so many familiar faces and folks that I worked with in D.C., whether it's Hunt Vandertol or Eric King, or so many of you in this room who have been just hospitable and gracious to me over my career. And so it's an honor to see you. It's always good to see Andy Johnson as well, who I know works extremely hard to make sure that events like this come together along with the staff. You're certainly an asset, Andy, and appreciate all of you all again. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my vision for the Commonwealth. It's one that puts aside the dysfunction and empty rhetoric of the past and promises a more prosperous future. As the next governor, I hope to work with Commerce Lexington and everyone in this room to realize that brighter future. I want you to know that I believe that Kentucky entrepreneurs deserve a seat at the table of governing. And this isn't just some platitude. This is something that I mean, because what I want for you is the same thing that I wanted for my parents growing up. You see, when I was growing up in E-Town, they owned a small business. It was a coffee shop, Zach's Coffee. Now, this was way before the Starbucks craze, but it was a good business for them, and I saw the many joys of entrepreneurship. I also saw the long hours that come along with it. Most mornings, save for Saturdays and Sundays, that little shop opened at 7 a.m. on the dot. And most summers, until I was in high school and sports got in the way, I'd be right alongside my dad, making our way across town to the Governor's Manor Shopping Center, where the store was located. Working there was a formative experience, because I got to see a cross-section of our community come into that store. And if I can analogize it, in many ways, it was like my earliest foray into constituent services. You'd have the occasional customer who thought the coffee was too hot, or that the latte didn't have enough espresso in it. So my parents lived by that golden rule that a lot of you all live by here today, that the customer is always right. And so they would make a drink, whether it was my mom, dad, or Alex or Thomas, a couple of the employees that we had working there with us, they would, without hesitation, pour that extra cup of coffee or remake that drink because they knew, like you all, that the customer's always right. But more times than not, they got it right on the first swing. They got it right on the first try. And they built a loyal customer base, which we came to describe as our regulars. And the regulars trusted my parents. So my dad would reach across the counter to hand a customer a cup of coffee or a brown bag with a bagel in it to go. They would often share with my father the highs and lows of that week or the weekend prior. I heard about what my classmates had going on, or whose grandparents were in town, or what family trips were coming up. I'd hear about promotions and renovations to homes, or what new cars had been rolled out at the Swope dealership there in E-Town. I heard it all. And being near that counter provided a wealth of knowledge. I'd also hear customers ask my dad to pray for them because of certain pressures that they were facing at work or because of struggles at home. My parents' coffee shop for many years was E-Town's version of Cheers. We just substituted coffee in for the alcohol. The store also gave me a keen awareness of the value of a dollar. I still remember when my parents decided to humor me by allowing me to make cappuccinos and lattes and some of their specialty sandwiches. And if my work was satisfactory, my dad would reward me at the end of the day by opening the cash register and pulling out a $20 bill. Now, for a 10-year-old, this was a big deal. But I also saw the risk. Saw my parents stretch the store's budget to help pay for employees that desperately needed that opportunity to work. I remember spending all night in our stick shift Toyota Elantra as we made our way to Clearwater, Florida, to purchase a coffee roaster because my dad believed that if we produced a better product, we could keep Starbucks and others out of E-Town and stave off the competition. That ultimately did not happen, but we certainly gave it our best effort. They did everything they possibly could to keep that business humming along, and although they closed in the mid-2000s, left a mark on our town and certainly on me. It took those lessons that I learned at my parents' coffee shop to the University of Louisville, where I had the opportunity to play a little college football. Now, before you heckle me, let me just say, and Eric King knows this, play is a very generous term. I had the best seat in the house, which was on the bench, rooting for folks that were a lot more talented than I was. But it was a wonderful experience. I then stayed at U of L and graduated from the Brandeis School of Law, and then moved here to Lexington, where so many of you in this room I began to develop relationships with because I was at that time clerking for Judge Van Tatenhove. We lived here. I lived on Turkey Foot for my first year, and then Old Georgetown Street the second year. But we would commute from here over to London, Kentucky, for where his duty station was at that time. After the clerkship, I returned to Louisville and worked at Stites and Harbison, and that was before going up to D.C. to be Senator McConnell's counsel in his personal office, where I got to work on some exciting things. I got to build relationships with the law enforcement community, but at the same time, I got to help Senator McConnell and President Trump make sure that we put conservative justices on the United States Supreme Court, like Neil Gorsuch. I came back to Kentucky in June of 2017 and landed at Frost Brown Todd, and then in 2018, at the end of that year, got the crazy notion to run for Attorney General. Won that race in 2019, and it's been an honor to serve in this capacity. It's been an honor to work alongside you all on issues like human trafficking, on child abuse, on issues that affect our workforce, whether it be the opioid epidemic or the increase in violent crime that we've seen. And I'm grateful. I see Krista here, who was in our office for a period of time. I'm grateful for her service. I'm grateful for those that helped us bring in nearly $900 million into the state to fight the opioid epidemic. It has been an incredible opportunity to serve in this capacity, and it's been a great honor. And I'm equally proud to stand here before you today as the Republican nominee for governor. This has been a remarkable journey, and I'm always aware of the fact that it all started back in E-Town, back in Hardin County, in the lessons I learned at my parents' shop. And those lessons still inform how I think about issues related to our business community and to our economy. And from what I've seen, Washington certainly seems bent on making it harder and harder for you to make ends meet, to support your employees, and to serve your customers. Now, President Biden calls his plan Biden economics, but I think a lot of us in this room would aptly describe it as a failure. It's a failure because the policy that they now are calling the Inflation Reduction Act actually has nothing to do with inflation at all. Instead, it's about transforming our energy priorities, which is bureaucratic speak for making us less energy independent and more reliant on China. The Biden economic agenda, in many ways, is a three-headed monster. Higher energy prices that drive consumers away from fossil fuels, more government handouts that encourage able-bodied adults not to work, and rolls of new red tape that keep entrepreneurs away from industries that have fallen out of favor. While all that is going on in Washington, it's having a real impact on the main streets across our Commonwealth. There's a constant state of anxiety over record inflation and persistent workforce shortages. There are fewer Kentuckians working now here in our Commonwealth than when Governor Beshear took office. And more folks are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. But I believe that Kentucky can do better, and I believe we must have a governor who does better. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be naive to say that there aren't some good things that are happening here in our Commonwealth. Our state's budget reserves are healthy, and Kentucky is getting more competitive as our personal income tax rate goes down. But these signs of hope have one thing in common. They were given to us by the work of our General Assembly. It's the strong Republican leaders in our General Assembly who are setting our Commonwealth on a path to prosperity. And when our governor had the opportunity to alleviate the inflationary pressures that have been caused by Biden economics, to help alleviate that pressure placed on family budgets by higher cost groceries, higher cost gas, higher cost childcare, he did the exact opposite. He chose to veto tax cuts. He chose to veto pro-growth bills. He chose to veto the budget reserves. He spent nearly 4 years on the wrong side of many things that could help alleviate the pressures that are on our hardworking families. And it is my judgment that it is somewhat ironic that we now have a governor that will take credit for what our General Assembly has done, even though he spent the time during his tenure oftentimes throwing them under the bus. But I'm confident that most of us in this room understand that it's because of that Republican leadership out of our General Assembly that things are moving in the right direction. And I'm confident that we can have a legislature and a governor that are rowing in the same direction to make sure that this Commonwealth is the best and brightest version of itself. I'm running for governor to be that partner, to be that person that helps accelerate what is working, to fix the serious challenges that we have seen over these last 4 years, to help Kentucky's business community grow for the next generation. We need a governor who is focused on the big challenges, on addressing and improving public safety, making sure that we address the painful learning loss that our kids have experienced, and that we create an environment of growth. That's why over the course of these last several weeks, I've been offering bold ideas to tackle these pressing challenges, because in a race for governor, it's not only about what the other person hasn't done, it's about what a new leader and a new direction can do for Kentucky. And so, in keeping our families and communities safe from violent crime, I believe that's one of the most basic tenets and responsibilities of leadership and of government. The surges of violent crime that we have seen in our cities and our small towns threaten Kentucky families and each one of your businesses. Now, our current occupant of the governor's office has failed to take this seriously. And as he was locking down our schools, he was unlocking our jails. In fact, in 2020, he let out nearly 2,000 criminals, and a third of those recommitted felony offenses here in our Commonwealth, making our communities less safe and the job of our law enforcement community that much harder. This is unacceptable leadership in my judgment. And that's why a few weeks ago, I announced and unveiled the Cameron Public Safety Plan. It's a robust 12-point plan to support the men and women of law enforcement and fight the violent crime and drugs that threaten our way of life. My plan includes new resources for law enforcement, recruitment and retention bonuses, as well as serious consequences for criminals who bring deadly drugs into our state. My goal is to make Kentucky the best place in our country to be a police officer. And rather than let criminals out of jail before their sentence is up, we will keep them there. Now, after releasing my plan, I was honored to receive the endorsement of the Kentucky State Fraternal Order of Police. Now, this is a big deal because this group, as many of you all know, endorsed Andy Beshear in 2019. But they found out that it's more important to have a governor who not only supports you in word, but also in deed. I've stood up for our law enforcement community throughout my career, and I'm certainly proud to have their support in this campaign. And the reason that this is an issue that should be important to people in this room, and I know that you take it seriously, because you know how hard it can be to attract top talent and businesses to our major communities. It's hard to get folks to want to come back to our city centers and occupy office space. We have to reverse this trend immediately. If we want our cities to be vibrant beacons of commerce, entertainment, and the arts, and I'm committed to doing so. Kentucky also needs a governor to overcome the staggering learning loss caused by the governor's school lockdowns. Right now, as many of you in this room can attest to, too many of our children are falling behind. I'm sure there are some parents in this room who have anxiety about whether their child is on par when it comes to reading, math, and science. I meet people like this every single day. Now, the governor closed schools for far longer than was prudent. Everyone knows it. It was a generational mistake. And the numbers, because of it, are shocking. Fewer than half of Kentucky students can read at grade level. In math, it's even worse. Science, just 29%. Since this governor has taken office, we have declined in every major category by which we assess student progress. The test scores are disappointing, but also as disappointing is the staggering rate of truancy. Because Governor Beshear was indifferent to opening our schools, a lot of kids now are indifferent to actually going to class. Chronic absenteeism is near 30% since the lockdowns. That's 3 in 10 kids simply missing from our schools. Again, that's something that shouldn't be acceptable. And it certainly won't be when I am governor. We will turn our focus back to delivering high-quality results and being an education leader. The problem in the classroom isn't just an education crisis. As you all know, it is a workforce and economic one as well. This learning loss, if you look at the National Assessment for Educational Progress, their report, the learning loss has been estimated to reduce students' lifetime earnings by tens of thousands of dollars. The failures of the last 4 years will cause ripple effects for generations. And we are on the cusp of witnessing the first generation in Kentucky's history to be worse off than their parents. How can we grow an economy if we are not able to have our children read or do math? This is your future workforce that is at stake. And I want you to know that as the next governor, I intend to catch them up. Without a qualified workforce, good jobs will leave Kentucky. We already have one of the worst labor force participation rates in the nation. Too many have decided they are better off at home and not at work. And the troubling situation in our public schools today shows that it could get worse unless we act. So last week, I unveiled the Cameron Catch-Up Plan, a bold strategy to take on the challenges facing Kentucky students. I proposed a historic expansion of reading and math instruction, a restoration of order in the classroom, and a surge of resources and support to our teachers. You all have probably seen, because you've been inundated with them, a lot of ads on TV claiming that this or that about my views on education. These scripts are read by people that don't know me, have never met me, and have no idea my position on education. So part of my conversation today is about setting that record straight. I believe firmly in our public education system because I am a product of it. I believe in teachers because they helped make me into the man I am today. Teachers like Mrs. Thurman, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Bauer, they've all had an integral part in who I am today. I believe in paying them what they deserve and believe in getting our schools back to the basics of reading, writing, and math. And any TV ad that tells you differently is simply misrepresenting the facts. I'm married to a teacher. My wife, Mackenzie, spent nearly 7 years in the Oldham County school system, teaching 5th and 3rd grade. My sister-in-law, right now, teaches in the JCPS school system. And my mom, as Ed and others can attest to, retired as a professor at the Elizabethtown Community College just a few years ago. And so when I say I know and care about the experiences of our teachers, I mean it, because I've lived it through those 3 women and the lives that they have been a part of as school teachers and public educators. And I want to say again, if there's anyone in this room who is an educator or knows an educator, let me tell you, let me assure you that when we offer a proposal on education, it is out of a spirit of humility. I know some of you might have misgivings about the Republican Party because of past challenges. But know that as I present my case on education, know that I do it out of a sign of respect, out of a sign that I value you and that I appreciate you. And know that the Republican Party under my leadership would not only say what you want to hear, but we will back it up in deed and in action. We'll move away from the divisions of the past with a singular focus of supporting our teachers and helping our students rediscover a love of learning. The moment demands that we do so because we cannot build a prosperous future for our Commonwealth without catching our future generations up. Finally, as governor, I want to restore a culture of work and encourage more able-bodied Kentuckians back into our workforce. Working with leaders in this room and the General Assembly will create an economic environment that is primed for growth and makes it easier for people who want a brighter future to get ahead. We won't accept out-of-control inflation from Biden economics as the standard. And I won't sit quietly as the federal government tries to shut down our coal plants, to regulate every puddle on a family farm, or to drown a community bank in red tape or regulations. In the coming weeks, I will be announcing an economic plan for Kentucky's future. We'll build on the General Assembly's tax cuts to make our Commonwealth the best place for job creation and expansion. We will reinvigorate a culture that respects work, not one that settles for government dependence. And we'll reach out to every corner of Kentucky to help families thrive. My plan will also lift up every Kentuckian who works hard, plays by the rules, and wants to give their children a better life. I'm going to be a common sense governor who thinks able-bodied individuals should be put in the best position possible to embrace a culture and the dignity of work. This is my vision for a strong Kentucky, keeping communities safe, helping students succeed, and empowering our businesses to grow. It's a tall order, but we need a governor who is willing to embrace the hard and difficult challenges. And I'm asking you all in this room and folks across our 120 counties to give me the opportunity to be that governor. That's what I think is the key difference in this campaign. When it comes to getting these big issues done in Kentucky, we've got to have strong leadership that has a relationship with our General Assembly. The current occupant of our governor's office, as you all know, does not have that relationship. I have that relationship, and I will use it to the greatest effect to make sure that this Commonwealth is a shining city on a hill, a model and an example for the rest of the nation to follow. We will bring unprecedented collaboration amongst the various entities and organizations across our state to help drive economic growth, to make sure that this Commonwealth can be all that it can be. I think at the end of the day, we've got to accept leaders that not only provide empty rhetoric, but can get things done for you all. That is my promise to you. That is my commitment to you, is that I will be a governor that gets things done, that tackles these big issues that are important to the structural foundation of our Commonwealth: quality education, low crime, protecting the family unit, making sure our economy grows. Because we know if we do that, and if we build a better and more durable Commonwealth, this will be a place that our kids want to stay, grow up, and raise their families. May God bless you, and God bless Kentucky. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General. We have a few questions we would like to ask you, and many of these topics you've already touched on, but you can dig maybe a little bit deeper into. So nationwide, 12 million jobs available, 6 million people to fill. You can take that and you can spread that across the Commonwealth, and we have the same challenge. So what specific things would you do from a workforce development standpoint, and even from education? And specifically, one of the things I want you to touch on is how would you work with higher education? You talked about K through 12, but how would you work with higher education as well?
Yeah, I think it's important. I was just with Atlas Air yesterday in northern Kentucky. I mean, they are trying to build partnerships with higher education to make sure that we've got enough mechanics, make sure that we have enough pilots, They were touting the fact that EKU has a fantastic aviation center and training program. I want to make sure that folks like Atlas Air and companies like Atlas Air feel like when it comes to higher education, whether it's UK, U of L, Eastern, the multitude of universities that we have, that they are in a position to succeed and get students right here from Kentucky that can fill these jobs. I know as I talk to folks in the healthcare sector, they're constantly trying to figure out what to do as it relates to the shortages that we have in nursing. Again, our higher education, our community colleges can step up to the plate to make sure that certificates and training are in place to fill these jobs as quickly as possible. Because as it relates to healthcare, we know the more nurses we have, the better healthcare outcomes we will have down the road. And so that is how I hope to tackle it, by partnering with our universities and our community colleges on that front, and then making sure that there are training programs. Again, Atlas Air yesterday, there are, I believe, 17 school districts in 3 counties in northern Kentucky. Those 17 school districts are working with Atlas Air now to put in training programs at the high school level to get people interested in aviation, get them interested. And some of these jobs, as they articulated yesterday to me, you don't have to have a college degree. You can have a GED, or you can pair that with certifications and other training courses. I think we've got to have an across-the-board approach to getting these jobs filled. And another thing that government can do, government can't, sometimes you hear that government creates jobs. Well, you all create jobs. We can set the conditions to allow for job creation, and that's why I talk about establishing this culture of work. And to the extent we can have able-bodied participants, as I've talked to healthcare providers, they say it was important to expand Medicaid coverage. For years it had been the categories of means tested and medically necessary. It's been expanded to able-bodied participants. It was important to do that because a lot of folks would come into the ER, they wouldn't have coverage, and then the hospital would bear the cost of that. And then that would prevent them from being able to improve their facilities. And so I understand the expansion, but what I do not understand is that if you are an able-bodied individual, particularly if we want to maintain the program for the means-tested and the medically necessary individuals, if you're an able-bodied individual, I think it's important that we have work requirements, again, to establish that culture of work here in Kentucky.
You mentioned you would help our students who are lagging behind in their education to catch up. What are some of the thoughts and ideas you have on how you would go about doing that?
Well, one of the things that I alluded to earlier, I think it's important, and you all deserve it, in a race for governor, not to just talk about what the other person's not doing right, it's to talk about what my vision is for this office. And I think Kentucky can lead on the issue of education. And there are Republican governors right now leading on the issue of education. Just look at what Sarah Huckabee Sanders just did in Arkansas, or what Glenn Youngkin is trying to do in Virginia. So here is an opportunity for, not only in word but in action, me to put my money where my mouth is. And that's why we unveiled the Cameron Catch-Up Plan last week. This is a plan about providing a 16-week tutoring program, part of which will be in the summer, and then the other part will be after-school instruction for our kids to help them catch up on reading, math, and science, because we know those are great indicators, if you will, for future success. And so this program is going to focus on this, and this is a tried and true program. In fact, Tennessee has it, Utah has it, Arizona has it, and they've seen an increase in the things that we care about, reading, science, and math for their students. And Kentucky's going to be the first state in the nation to expand it to 16 weeks, because I've worked with and talked to our General Assembly about getting this in place. And not only is it going to be focused on getting our students caught up, this is also about making sure that our teachers know that they are appreciated and respected. And so we're going to provide them with the resources. This is going to be a volunteer program, and if they decide to do it, we're going to pay them for it. And I also think that separate and apart from that, we need to increase the starting pay of our teachers, knowing that in the school systems will have a ripple effect upwards on all the salaries of our teachers. This is a program as well that is about making sure that we bring discipline back to the classroom. in the form of allowing and empowering a teacher that if there is a disruption, we've got to make sure that a teacher has the ability to have a classroom that is a disruption-free classroom so that the kids can thrive in the best environment possible. And so that's why we unveiled this plan. That's why I've already talked to the legislature about getting it passed. This is going to be about a $100 million plan. The legislature has already agreed that they're ready to pass this because they know that I'm serious about helping out our public education system. Again, it's a lived experience for me, whether it's my wife, my sister-in-law, or my mom, or growing up in the Hardin County school system. And so we're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that our public education system is the best that it can be, a world-class system, one that is about reading, writing, and math, to make sure that our kids are in a position not only to compete domestically, but also globally.
Okay, you touched on business climate and a few specific things, but the General Assembly has made the improving the Kentucky's tax climate a priority. So how would a Cameron administration address tax and regulatory policies to make Kentucky more competitive with surrounding states?
Well, as a philosophical matter, I think, and as an experience as a kid seeing my parents with their small business, the less regulation that we can have as it relates to the bureaucracy that occurs, the better. On a practical level, when it comes to what our legislature has done, I want to be a partner with them. I was just with Chairman Chris McDaniel, who was instrumental in the budget process and making sure that our income tax rate is getting down to zero. I want to get there as quickly as we possibly can. And I hope that you all in this room can respect the way in which our General Assembly is doing this. They're doing it in a thoughtful manner that ties the lowering of our income tax rate to revenue triggers. It's a thoughtful approach, and in many ways it contrasts with what happened in Kansas a few years ago, where they went too fast and it didn't do their economy very well. So our legislature, because of thoughtful leadership by Chairman McDaniel and Jason Petrie and others, have put us in the right position to continue to lower it down to zero. I was with Bill Lee in Tennessee here recently, and one of the things that we talked about is Kentucky is in a very unique position from Tennessee, meaning that we talk a lot about the fact that they have a 0% income tax rate, but what we don't talk about is that they've never had an income tax. And so Kentucky is taking some innovative steps to get on par with Tennessee so that folks, when they're traveling 65 south or heading 75, they're stopping here in Kentucky and not going on their way down to Tennessee.
How does the state continue to generate the revenues needed for critical services and infrastructure? And how would your administration work with the legislature on the tax reforms?
Well, it's back to this conversation about our legislature entering into this thoughtfully. And as it relates to those revenue triggers, our General Assembly and me as governor are not going to put Kentucky in a position where we are jeopardizing services that we need to make sure that our communities feel safe. And so you have an assurance from me that I'll work with the legislature to make sure that we continue that thoughtful approach to tax reduction in the years to come.
So if we have another COVID situation occur, and many people say that we always need to be preparing and ready for that based on our experience of 2020, how would you handle that situation? And what did you learn from the 2020 that you would apply to any kind of unique new situations? Well,
to the extent there are healthcare providers in this room or folks that were on the ground constantly during COVID, thank you. Let me start by saying that. I know you were under intense pressure, and I appreciate all of our healthcare professionals that went above and beyond to confront this great challenge. One of the things that I think was frustrating for a lot of people and businesses in particular was the fact that the rules didn't seem to make a lot of sense. For instance, if you were a big business, you were oftentimes told that you were essential. And if you were a small business, you were told you had to play by a separate set of rules and that you were non-essential and you had to shut your doors. And then to the extent folks were put on the unemployment rolls, when they went to Frankfurt to try to get unemployment, the office was either closed or they were sending the checks to the wrong people. That shouldn't be the way that government functions. We shouldn't be playing winners and losers, regardless of what the situation is. And then on top of it, you had leadership in Frankfurt that somehow told you that, presumably, at least I think this was the rationale, is that COVID somehow stopped at the Kentucky state border, meaning that if you left and came back, you had to quarantine for a period of 14 days. Say if you lived in northern Kentucky and you liked barbecue and you wanted to go over to Montgomery Inn Barbecue, you go across the river, come back, that would get you a 20-minute ride, would get you a 14-day quarantine. But you could travel from northern Kentucky and go west to western Kentucky. If you liked Old Hickory or Moonlight, that's a 4 or 5 hour drive. You could make that trip, presumably making stops along the way and seeing people. And if the idea was limiting the exposure to COVID, how is a 20-minute ride across the river, how does that make for any more exposure than that 4 or 5 hour ride? So there were a lot of rules during COVID that did not make sense. And it pitted big business against small business. You all here that live in Lexington know that at some point the Herald Leader ran a story about Portofino's that said that they had to close because they could not keep up with the inconsistency of the rules that were being doled out by the Beshear administration. So my first priority as it relates to any decision making is, do the rules make sense? And are they made in a way that allows everyone to play by those same rules? You know, the standard at that point, before we kind of figured out they didn't really know what they were talking about, was the CDC. And so they had guidelines. The governor would say that a big business, they could follow those guidelines, but if you were a church or a small business, somehow you couldn't follow those guidelines. Again, we need to have rules across the board that make sense and need with the goal of being able to keep as many people open as possible. That would be my priority. Look, the fact that we shut down schools for nearly 2 years is inconceivable. My wife, when she was able finally to go back into the classroom, would remark on the fact that even though she was in the classroom and 6 feet away from her students, was told that she had to wear a cloth mask. And you know that if anyone's a speech pathologist in this room, it is important for a child, for their development, not only to hear you, but also to see your lips. But the governor was indifferent to that. But at the same time, he was putting cloth masks on our teachers. He would get up at 4 o'clock every day. He'd walk to a podium with his mask on, take his mask off, and then communicate to all of you all his ideas, because he thought it was important for you all to see his lips, again, because it helps in terms of processing information. But he did not think that was important enough for our students. Again, the inconsistencies and the hypocrisy that occurred during that period of time can never happen again.
So let's keep talking economic development. We work closely with the Cabinet, Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. We focus on retention, expansion, recruitment, startup, talent attraction, marketing, branding, kind of to the staff and our leaders, we're kind of talking about our new plan. But those are key functions. What would your Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development look like?
We would certainly do everything we could to partner with you all and make sure that that relationship is a meaningful one, not just one that is a box checking exercise. And on top of that, I think we need a diverse economic development cabinet. I often travel into Eastern Kentucky, and they oftentimes tell me they feel like they've been overlooked, that they believe confidently that to the extent we are attracting small manufacturing jobs, we need to open that market up to Eastern Kentucky, because there's hardworking people there that want jobs, just the opportunities are not there. And so I want to be a governor that is recruiting folks to the economic development cabinet that have an array of experiences that are diversified by where they live regionally here in Kentucky, so that every piece of our Commonwealth is getting a piece of the pie when it comes to economic development.
Also, the state government provided a $100 million Kentucky Product Development Initiative funding program. Is that something that you would continue, and would it look different? Would it look the same? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I certainly would commit to continuing that important effort. And so you have my word and commitment on that, absolutely.
So kind of wrapping up here on public safety. Your experience as Attorney General has prepared you to address some of Kentucky's more difficult public safety issues like the drug epidemic. I know you talked about how you would put more funding in some of these key areas, but can you kind of dig down a little bit more and kind of share with us some of those key shortcomings that we have, public safety threats, and then how your administration would deal with them?
Well, the two biggest public safety challenges we have right now, one is homegrown, the other one is brought to us from abroad. The one that's brought to us from abroad makes its way from China. At least some of the components of fentanyl make their way from China. They're manufactured now because of the Trump administration basically told China you can't do this, and China agreed. They've now gotten savvy enough to now they're sending out the components to other countries. They're being assembled there. The synthetics or fentanyl are being assembled there. They make its way across our southern border and hurt our communities right here in Kentucky. And so part of the reason that I was adamant about getting these lawsuits settled, because my predecessor had filed a lot of lawsuits, but we hadn't gotten any money into our state. And so I wanted to get them settled so that we could start making a significant down payment on fighting and the drug epidemic and breaking the cycles of addiction. And we're in the process, again, of bringing that $900 million into the state, and that's going to all of our counties and our cities to help with this plague. In addition to that, I think the big thing that you can do as governor is use the pulpit to make sure that we're highlighting where this is coming from and how it is killing our people. And I'm going to be a governor that does that, but also, as I've unveiled in the Cameron Public Safety Plan, we can use technology in a way to identify hotspots as it relates to fentanyl and opioid abuses. And by doing that, we can target our law enforcement efforts to tamp down in those particular areas. And so we're going to do that. That's part of the plan. The other thing that I think is incredibly important as a deterrent, we've got to tell folks that are peddling this poison that you're not welcome here, that it's not welcome here, and if you come here, you're going to pay a stiff penalty for doing it. Meaning that we need to up the homicide statutes to allow for that to be charged if the poison that comes here kills one of our people. And I'm committed to doing that. That's the issue from abroad that is hurting our people. The other one is just violent crime. We have seen, because of some of the stuff that I think has largely been caused by the far left feeling like they've been emboldened, and laws have been, the pendulum swings on our laws, and we aren't as tough as we need to be on crime. I mean, this isn't as big of a challenge in Lexington, but in Louisville, there are areas that folks will not come back to. There are office buildings that folks will not come back to because of the violent crime issue. And so I think as a governor, you've got to send a strong message that you're going to do something about that. That's why I've proposed putting a Kentucky State Police post in Louisville, because if we're serious about addressing violent crime, we need to have skin in the game from state government and from our Kentucky State Police. The other thing that I think is incredibly important on this is that you have a governor that doesn't add to the violent crime issue, that doesn't allow 1,700 criminals to leave jail early, and then a third of those recommit felonies. So you won't have that when I'm governor.
All right, last question. What's the one question you wanted me to ask you that I didn't ask you?
The election is on November 7th, and well, look, I appreciate you all. I know you all have got incredibly busy schedules. I'm honored that you gave me an opportunity to share some of the things about this race for governor. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be rolling out our economic plan at Paris with what we've already done on crime and education. And I just appreciate if you give us a fair hearing, give us an opportunity to take the Commonwealth in a better and brighter direction. God bless you, and God bless our Commonwealth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.